Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this webinar, The Human Impact of AI. We're joined today by three distinguished people. I'll do them, I think, alphabetically. Julia Bardmesser, who has done a lot of work in analytics for Citibank and Deutsche Bank. She's our data analytics counsel here at IDCA, and she runs a company now called Data for Real. Let's see who's next alphabetically. Waldo, you're not last this time. Waldo Waldman, who is formerly he was a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. He's a pilot trainer, also a keynote speaker. Has a lot of insights not only in technology but in the organizational uses of them, and he's also serves as the Human Capital Counsel for IDCA, which is very useful. And we have Dr. Claire Walsh, who's joining us from the UK. She works with and is one of the honchos at an organization called the Institute of Analytics. And so they do this for a living and have a lot of great insights. I had met Claire earlier at an event this year and was really impressed by all the research and practical work that they do. Now, normally for these webinars at the beginning, we'll present some fun facts and figures about the market. We're not going to do that today because this topic is the human impact of AI, and really along with that, the organizational impact of AI. And it doesn't really matter. It's not something that I think we can measure by the size of the market. We're also really pleased. There was an extraordinary sign up for this webinar, so we're really happy to see everybody here at this late date of the year joining us for this. And we really want to talk about the impact. I think everybody who's watching this is familiar with the terms. We can have a little clarity as we move on to maybe some of the specific terms, but they know what it is. And I think everyone is surprised to some degree by the reemergence of AI recently, and especially, as Waldo pointed out to me earlier, the acceleration of it, I think, is what has surprised people a little bit. So with that, I wanted to, I'm using a real high-tech device here to remember some things. I wanted to run down a checklist of nightmares. So of AI, when I first started thinking of it, as ChatGPT emerged and a few other things, it looks like it could be a threat to jobs. Looks like it increases the potential to disseminate misinformation and deep fakes. And deep fakes can be used in all sorts of cyber scams, in addition to, the old maxim that the internet doesn't know you're a dog. Now the internet has no clue who you might be. There's an existential threat that people have. When will the singularity come that AI is smarter than us and puts us out of existence? Maybe more practically speaking, any sort of powerful tool in the hands of governments can scare people. I mentioned all this to Julia a week or so ago. We were talking, and her response was, maybe we were always able to do these things, and there's really practical uses of it. I think that's what you told me. Julia, what did you tell me when I showed you that list?
So, let's acknowledge first that we actually don't know yet all the ways AI is going to develop. We're in the very beginning. So think about the humanity when it started. God, I don't remember how many billions years ago. And when there were small groups of humans living off the land, could anybody predict what we are now? So we don't know.
It's been difficult,
yeah. So, and all the things you mentioned, humans are able to do it themselves really well, which is why AI can do it, because AI is feeding off human activity. So think about it as a baby, and in baby we have this lovely conversation. Is it nature or is it nurture?
Yeah.
And then you say, well, this is nature, this is from the other family genes, it's nothing to do with what we are doing as a parents. And this is, of course, all the good things is because I'm such a good mother and I'm nurturing my child so well. So in AI case, it's all nurture, it's our activity. So when we do cybercrime or we impersonate people or we create deep fakes, we are pretty much teaching AI to do all of this. So a lot of the views that people have on how AI is going to develop to a certain degree depends on whether or not the view technology with optimism or pessimism, and whether or not they view humanity with optimism or pessimism.
Right. Now I view
Well,
humanity kind of pessimistically, but Waldo said I talked to him. I was talking to him yesterday, I think, about this topic, and there's kind of this subtle point of, I think Waldo was telling me it's not so much you need to be afraid, but you need to be aware, especially I think when it comes to your job and the future of your job. Is that a fair way to describe what you think, Waldo?
Well, if you're not careful, like Julia inferred, the misinformation, the cybercrime, all those things could impact society, perspective, our children, business, socio-political, and even military applications are obviously rampant. But you can leverage it and should leverage it to your advantage. You should never be replaced there. As they say, trust but verify. But I think you need to capitalize on your skill set as a human with emotional intelligence, relationships that are garnered beyond the internet, a phone, really double down on your ability to connect with people, but do your due diligence, go deeper into researching. I was on Instagram last night and I was watching some of these videos, and it was, past presidents, I won't say specifically, but they were using artificial intelligence to, move the mouth and share words and very disparaging statements and comments that you saying, oh my goodness, I can't believe this past president is saying something, but it was obviously fake. It was obviously used to incite fear, anxiety, hatred, emotion, which just like any news media outlet is going to garner attention. So we have to be careful. But also, as Julia mentioned, hey, but if we do it with the right intention and put love out there and positive return on our investment of time, we really can benefit from the unique and creative uses of AI. But
Right. Claire, what do you make of everything you've heard for the last 5 minutes?
I completely agree with you. I think we don't want to dismiss the fear. I think there is genuine fear out there, fear of the unknown, of this scary new technology. I've been asked so many times this year, is AI going to take all our jobs? Is it going to kill us? Answered that question so many times. And it comes from a real place of fear. I mean, for me, nobody's automating entire jobs. We're automating roles within jobs. When it comes to a practical level, if somebody says to me, I spend a lot of my time doing data cleaning and I don't like it, and my response is, well, you know what, I could automate that for you. I've never actually heard someone say, oh, no, I love to keep going. Usually the kinds of tasks we're automating are the kind you don't really want to do anyway. And I think when it comes, although there's been a lot of stuff in the media this year, in reality, when it comes to organizations adopting AI, we're still very, very slow. We've got a few very large companies doing an awful lot very publicly, but they represent about 5% of all of the organizations out there. So yeah, I mean, adoption has been nothing like we predicted 10 years ago, where we said 50% would vanish. It's nothing like that.
That sort of thing. Yeah. A good fear-mongering headline can always work. I've been around long enough. I actually, when I was in college, remember I was there during the time where 1 year calculators were forbidden, and literally the next year they were required. And we learned it's like I can do long division, I can do multiplication with the pen and paper. We all can, but I sure like it when the calculator does it instead. I like it when the spreadsheet does things instead of working them out. So I sometimes like to think of AI in this capacity, specifically with ChatGPT. It does research for me. It doesn't write for me. I'm not the world's greatest writer, but I'm a lot better writer than ChatGPT. But that's not the point. ChatGPT is a much quicker researcher. It finds things for me in seconds that take me a while. Julia, what do you think of that? Because I think you really like to see the practical application in a lot of business tasks in what you do. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, there is a lot of acceleration that ChatGPT brings to really annoying tasks. So though with the research, given that sometimes it gives you incorrect answers, My recommendation is to have it summarize what you know, as opposed to give you information about things you don't know, because you're just never quite sure whether or not it's right. But there's some professions that are going to be impacted. The immediate one that comes to mind is actually legal profession, because a lot of lawyers spend their time doing document production, so going through documents and finding the nugget that's needed for the trial to make a point. So not ChatGPT, but large language models can do it significantly faster and better. So there are going to be professions that are going to be impacted, that are very heavy research summarize type of professions. There is a kind of talk out there that, for example, business management consulting is going to be impacted quite a bit, because again, it's a profession where the large part is summarize the existing knowledge in easy to read format. So that's going to be an impact, but it's also a positive impact, because in my own writing, when I work with my clients and I need to prepare, I ask ChatGPT, give me a template for this type of thing. It gives me a template. I fill it out. It can't fill it out for my client, but it
Yeah.
saves me, I don't know, a couple of hours of figuring
Right.
out what the template should
Right.
be.
That's what I'm thinking. Well, let me switch gears real quickly. I think everyone that's watching can keep up. Move more through technology. You train fighter pilots. You're operating incredibly sophisticated technologies. You cannot make mistakes. Is AI, will it have an impact at that level? Maybe in training, if nothing else, in improving outcomes and better analysis of all the data you collect. Is that an issue you deal with?
Yeah. So we have a saying in the fighter world, speed is life. Speed, velocity, responsiveness. And if you look at business and even interaction socially, your ability to respond and respond correctly based on the amount of information you have is going to be the key to life or death, or success or failure. I'm going to try to put a little image into my screen here. Let me know if this shows up here. I'm going to make a little bit. Right. So you see this heads up display. It's a lot of information, data, airspeed, altitude, steer points, radio frequencies, all that information you need to make decisions on quickly. And using AI to distill that information down, and Julia mentioned it, and you did as well, if we can use this asset, this weapon system as humans, to distill a complex amount of information so that we can have more confidence in the decision and response we take, now we're leveraging it as human beings working with other human beings. In combat, it could cost you the ability to hit a target, your life and death. In business, it can cost you a sale. First to respond is usually the one to win. So as a teammate for your company, finding new innovative ways to leverage the information that ChatGPT can give you is going to be that competitive advantage that you need. And if you don't use it, the issue with human capital is then you may become defunct or irrelevant.
I mean, somebody else is using it if you're not, and it's a competitive world. I mean, Claire, a little ignorant on the scope of what you do. Are you seeing these issues we're discussing across a variety of industries and use cases?
Yeah, I think what Waldo is saying is very much people are becoming aware that either they control the machines or the machines control them, and so perhaps they do need to start thinking about how they need to learn about how to use these technologies. And I think one of the big challenges we've had, I do a lot of work advising governments on their AI regulation. Okay. And one of the biggest challenges we have is just the lack of skills out there at the moment. We all want to behave responsibly. We all want to do the right thing. The vast majority of us, bad actors, I think, will always be bad actors. But it's very challenging to do the right thing if you don't actually understand the technologies, and they can be tricky these can be very tricky to understand. we're dealing with probabilities,
Right.
which are not the easiest. You know, we all think we
That's
understand
true.
probability, but they're kind of challenging sometimes.
Right.
So,
And well, in probability too, this is true. I mean, starting with medical issues, a lot of times people want a certain answer,
yeah.
and there's no certain answers. I think the whole world works on the uncertainty principle, it seems, and a lot of times you are working with statistics and probabilities, and 100% certitude is actually not what you want, but a lot of people may think so. Is that, I mean, fair way to say that?
Yeah, I think if you've got 100% certainty, you don't need an AI to help you.
There you go.
If you've got an AI helping you, it's because it's a very difficult, complex
I knew you could make
situation.
that clear.
Yeah.
We're gonna move to the surveys here. We have, if our producers can put up, we have some survey questions for everybody. And we have some questions from the audience, from the attendees already. So let's get we can get the survey question. There is our first survey. Which AI technologies are under discussion at your organization? See, and we didn't have to spend 20 minutes explaining what all these are because the people that attend know it. So their choices are machine learning, deep learning, generative AI, or an artificial general intelligence, AGI. And so far, I'll tell you what, 47% said all of them.
Wow.
And actually, kind of surprisingly, 22% of our attendees today have said none of them. So there's 22% that haven't gotten there yet or don't consider it's important or for whatever reason. And then the specific technologies each get a few percentages. But the big answer, actually the final answer, is right on the button there. 50% said all of them. And if we could bring up question 2, that would be great. How concerned are you about AI and its advanced technologies impacting human jobs? And your choices are extremely concerned, moderately concerned, somewhat concerned, not very concerned, not concerned at all. I violated the principle there. You really shouldn't give people 5 choices. Give them 3 or 4. And I biased it where 3 of them are positive and 2 of them are negative. But that said, we have 40% are somewhat concerned, which is sort of, I think, what you'd expect. The 4% contrarians in the crowd have said they're not concerned at all, and 9% are extremely concerned. So the worrywarts and the contrarians can get together and maybe emerge somewhere in the middle. And the great middle ground of moderately concerned and not too concerned is going to be, if I can add, 87% of respondents. 87% of respondents have a reasonable level of concern about AI. And that's just, I think, we're seeking knowledge. A couple of questions have come up. I want to address them. And I will, let's start with Claire on this one. Most inventions start with good intentions. What are the possible bad things that could happen with AI? Claire, what does your research tell you about this, if anything?
Well, the bad things are the unintended consequences, and it's very challenging to anticipate what those unintended consequences will be. They happen, and we have to deal with them. And I think that's one of the big dangers. There was a survey, I think, that I mean, one of the big worries with generative AI is that these are optimized to be persuasive, and we saw how bad social media has been in terms of promoting social division. And there was a big concern, could generative AI make this even worse? And I think the conclusion was it couldn't possibly get worse. Trust is at an all-time low anyway, which was a sad state of our situation.
Well, Julia, what do you think of that? We're already capable of hurting ourselves. But
yeah,
anyway,
we're quite capable.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Unintended consequences. That's what the question's at, really. What's your take on that?
So I think one of the things that we really need to think about, and I think it's also a very hard question, is bias that we build into the model. Again, model feeds on our actions. We as humanity are biased. That's what we are. That's how we've evolved. So if models keep feeding on us and keep making decisions, and then those decisions get fed in, the bias that undermines a lot of unfairness in the world will propagate even more. So I think kind of one of the first ones. I think, I don't know if it's regulations or it's like government regulations, which I'm a little bit concerned to the point that not a lot of people actually understand. It's very difficult to regulate effectively something you don't understand.
Yes.
So that's
Which
complexity.
the
But
EU
then
is
there,
doing right. The EU is doing right now. But anyway, go on.
yeah, but it's again, it's hard to regulate well something
Yeah.
you don't understand. And we see it in financial markets. Forget about AI. We see it in
Yeah.
financial markets all the time. We see it in crypto markets when people who or entities that don't understand blockchain
Right.
try to regulate cryptocurrency. So we see this all the time. So, but there's something we need to figure out as a humanity very quickly. How are we going to deal with biases? And there's some approaches. I've been talking to people in that space who are very much concentrated on this, but there isn't one that, or a few that, okay, here is what you do to address it. I think, to me, I mean, the ones of social division, pretending to be something you're not, kicking off World War III because
Right.
somebody pretended and somebody replied, all of that is possible, but we also talk about it, so that's not unintended. But I think
Yeah.
the bias one is the one that's kind of underlying all of that, and that's hard to deal with.
For Waldo, I have you've heard what they've just said, but we have a couple other questions. I'm gonna let you answer these on your own. I'll just give them to you. Where people are saying, if AI can learn on its own, can it learn to protect itself? And this is the issue. I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that. Open the pod door, Hal. Open the pod door, Hal. I can't do that. Are you concerned, especially in, again, the uses of technology and the high speed that's involved in the military, especially an AI getting kind of a mind of its own to contravene things it should be doing, or sensing danger to itself? Is that an issue that you think about, that you work with?
I do think so. If you really dig deep, and there's a lot of amazing research and companies out there working, quantum computers, leveraging that quantum mechanics and physics into the ecosystem of artificial intelligence, so that they can think, they can feel, they can have some emotions.
Yeah.
And so if you have, let's say, you have a virtual girlfriend, I'm just going to use it for just, one of them gets rejected, they'll be potentially be angry, upset. And what happens when people are upset and they're not emotionally mature? They can do things, say things, hurt people, etc. And emotions are very scary when it comes to artificial intelligence, trying to recreate the human psyche. And that could also, right? And that's what kind of concerns me, especially if it starts propagating into certain elements, military, our
Let me, this is guy, let's go, yeah, let's go down this a little bit. So, because Julia's been talking about the human evolution, and we've spent a long time turning into what we are. And so we're affected by a little robot that looks like a dog. And if it wags its tail, it doesn't take long before we start to look at that little thing as being a real dog. And if suddenly someone would hit that dog with a hammer and put it into 1,000 pieces, people would be very upset. And that's just a simple little toy that you see everywhere. So this idea of anthropomorphizing, I almost said it correctly, AI seems like a big issue. You can, and they really, play around people's emotions. I mean, Claire, you're shaking your head. Yes. Is this something we should be thinking about?
I think people do like to believe, because these things sound so realistic, we like to attribute, as you say, we like to anthropomorphize them. And I think people do respond better to a robot with a smiley face as opposed to a robot with a neutral face. And certainly, our relationship with these machines is, we need to think about how we interact with machines, how we work with them, how we make decisions with them on the team. Human machine teaming is not going to go anywhere. As for this idea that we're getting towards artificial general intelligence, we are nowhere near that. Even something like ChatGPT is optimized to look convincingly like language, and that's all it does. It's terrifically narrow. It just is meant to look as convincingly like human speech as possible.
I always like to think,
Can
why
we
would you
all
leave
tell
things
that?
so
Sorry,
low?
Roger. Oops.
Yeah, what's
I
that?
was going to ask Claire because ChatGPT sounds like a human, but at this point, and I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn just because, you know, that's the place where you create business. At this point, I can actually tell who used ChatGPT in posting. There is a specifics to the language it's using that you can it's almost immediate. You can look at it and say, huh, somebody did ChatGPT and did not do any editing on top of it.
Mhm.
So it's kind of, you see it and I don't know about you, I immediately discount it a little bit.
I'm
It's
thinking
very
about,
difficult to apply to a specific situation. It can give you general advice on what to do in, you know, in a terrifically general way, but there's no way it can replace
well,
a human who
we-
really knows their business.
we've had the Turing test, I think, probably since the 50s. Dr. Alan Turing was a World War II era person. So that almost seems kind of antiquated or kind of quaint. Now, the idea if we can tell something is a machine or a person, because it's more like what we know you're a machine, but how much of I can't really articulate what I'm trying to say here. There's levels of nuance to Turing tests that we would have never thought of. Is that Waldo? Is that a correct way of looking at it?
So look, we have people on LinkedIn. It's a place to bring about business and build relationships and drive revenue, et cetera. We all know when we have an automated bot that's out there sending us LinkedIn messages, or they scan our LinkedIn profile and they send us that generic message. Artificial intelligence and leveraging those type of autoresponders, type of artificially generated communication conduits, I call them, are going to differentiate the person who does their due diligence, who spends a little bit of time differentiating, building that human relationship and saying, oh, this person's different. Maybe I should investigate that relationship, go a little bit deeper, explore that, as opposed to the artificially generated correspondence that's out there. And so if your team is spending all their time leveraging the artificial intelligence and not picking up the phone, going a little bit above and beyond to learn the nuances, I think you're going to be at a disadvantage. And this is where you can capitalize on the use of artificial intelligence to expedite responsiveness, speed, gathering intel, but then doubling down on the human aspect and enforcing these standards with your team, saying you've got to do a little bit there, go a little bit above and beyond to decommoditize yourself and nurture that relationship to improve the response rate from your prospects.
Let's get another
Can I
survey
offer?
question up. Go ahead. Yeah, I give you.
I was going
one
to
minute. We
offer
have to
an
take a break. Go
example
ahead.
on Valder's. So that's a great point. One of the things I've heard, like, embrace your imperfections, like your humanity, your imperfections. But the example I wanted to give, and it goes actually to one of the questions that we have also in the chat. So one of the best uses in industry for AI. So one of the kind of examples of when you try to provide intelligence to salespeople, they don't have a lot of time and they don't want to click around and they don't want to read reports. Where large language model can help is that on the way to a client, it, like, as you're driving, you're listening to a voice telling you you're going to see somebody, you're going to see a client ABC. Here is what we know about this client. Here is somebody else in our company who is dealing, who has a relationship with somebody in a subsidiary, and this is how much business you've sold. Because that's functionality. Who is common client? I've tried to build as a report, and salespeople just don't want to use it.
Right.
But what it doesn't gonna tell you, sales.
Hold that
Yeah,
thought.
Roger,
Hold
am
that
I
thought.
going on too long?
No, we have to take a break. What we're going to do, we have to put another survey question up here, and then we let everyone go away for 5 minutes. Let's answer this, and then we take a 5-minute break, not 6. So go ahead and take once you answer this question, we'll give you the answers, and we'll see, and then we'll take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and pick up right where you were, Julia. Claire, you've lost a whole thought process here. AI has clearly gotten into our heads, is what I'm taking from it, and it's starting to. It is starting to change our world. It's a human impact, meaning the way we're viewing things seems to be different. Okay, do you believe current legal frameworks are sufficient to address the ethical challenges posed by AI and immersive technologies? A lot going on in that question. Completely insufficient. 40% of the people have answered. There's no one who thinks that current legal frameworks are sufficient to address the ethical challenges posed by AI. Only 4% think that that's correct, that it is sufficient, and 40% say completely insufficient, and 28% have said somewhat insufficient. So 2/3 of our attendees believe need to do more. So we're going to take a quick break for 5 minutes, not 6, and we'll come back and we'll pick up where Julia was and also start addressing the issues of regulation that Claire brought up. So we'll be back. And we're live. People can hear us talking. They can't see us. We're free to chit chat a little bit, but just so you know that we are live during the break. And we will get back and talk to those issues. I'm going to take I got to look at something here. I'll be right back and then we'll start again in 5 minutes. Okay, 1 minute and we'll be back live. Claire's doing a remarkable job of staying awake after no sleep for about a week.
Oh, I know.
Uh, And he's back, and we're all here. And Julia, you can unmute now, and we can, Amir and Abbas, you can return us. Thank you, everyone, for returning. Everyone's hung in there. We've gotten a lot of questions. I forgot to introduce myself, by the way. I'm Roger Struckhoff. I'm in charge of research at IDCA. A lot of you probably already know that. I'm joined by three great researchers today, so I don't like to use my title because you're all really great at what you do. We've had a lot of questions, and I apologize to anyone out there if we don't get to your question. But what we do is if you really wish to interact with any of our panelists today, let us know. You can either send a message here, or you can, we reach you by email for your registration. Contact us that way, and we can relay your message and put you in contact with any of the panelists. So the last few minutes of the conversation took an unexpected turn for me, which was there does seem to be a little bit more tangible concern about AI and the effect that the impact, actually the topic, the impact on human beings, in that it does appear to be changing our world, maybe the way we perceive of things. And Julia, I had to interrupt before the break, but continue on that thought.
AI is there. So I was just given an example of differences at the current point of AI development, of where AI is incredibly helpful to the businesses. Again, it's summarizing the information in the way that humans can easily consume. And it's very helpful in the businesses. And of course, creating information that humans can easily consume can be used for all kinds of bad purposes as well. But in this scenario is salesperson will still use their relationship with the prospect, building the relationship, emotional intelligence, all of that. But this information would be with them. And so hopefully they will be much more effective at the sales and building the relationship than they would have if they had a bunch of paper to look at,
right.
which, it's hard to do. Now, is it possible? The answer is probably yes. Whatever a lot of things are possible with AI, and humanity is really good at figuring out really complex problems and getting things to do, all kinds of things. So again, where do you want to put your faith?
Right.
Right?
Let's stop right there. Waldo, where do you want to put your faith? Is it, it appears like there is an impact, and your whole focus with IDCA is on human capital. How is this affecting that?
It's you have to look at it once again, obviously with optimism and courage, or with fear. Look, I'm a keynote speaker. I speak at a lot of major national sales meetings.
Right.
I speak globally. We had a meeting at the National Speakers Association where this woman was up on stage, and there was a hologram of her, and there was this digital screen, and she was talking through certain things, and it was really amazing and different. And there was also another program I saw where there was a musician, and he was playing along with another musician. They were playing drums and he was playing keyboard. He was real, or he was playing guitar and he was real, and the other person was a hologram. Now, in my experience, I don't think I'll ever be replaced. And if I'm going to be replaced, I better think very differently about how I'm approaching my craft that's generating business and putting food on my table. So the people that are participating in this seminar, this webinar, and people in general have to say, can I leverage artificial intelligence to augment, to solidify, to reinforce my practice, to make me more relevant, and or if not, retool my skill sets, or as a leader, make sure my team is retooling and strapping on a different weapon system, I like to say, onto your aircraft. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you will be relevant. So for those that are out there wondering, that are going to be afraid, well, you better start speaking the brutal truth to your team, finding ways that they can retrain, because if not, they're going to leave you, go to another organization. The war for talent is already tremendously impacting our businesses. So you better start thinking of new innovative ways to deliver your keynote, to deliver your message, to deliver your protocol. Otherwise, you'll be irrelevant and out of work.
You're right.
That's
Now,
that's the
Claire,
bottom line, I think, in many aspects.
I think I have to agree with that. Claire, I tried to summarize what you said before. I realized now I might have been mansplaining a little bit, so I'm sorry if I did that. I think I was telling you what you do for a living. But my question for that context is, you work for Institute of Analytics. Your background is in analytics. You went to school for a long time for this. Um, a lot of people, that term, it's dry. It has to do with numbers. It's mathematics, and we're not talking about that at all today.
Yeah.
And so when I'm going to assume that at some point in your career or studies, you realize this, or maybe you realize it going in, that there's this huge, just human dimension to all of this data. Is that correct? And, if you could tell us kind of your path when you may have realized that and how it affects what you do today.
Yeah, I think if we talk about data analytics and computer coding, I
Yeah.
lose everybody. They glaze over. They don't want to know about it. But that's not what it's about. It's about decision making. How do we make the best decisions? And these days, you make the best decisions if you've got some great insights from data. And maybe if the decision is kind of boring and routine and repetitive, we want to automate it so you can spend your time thinking about other amazing things that you can think about. I think one of the things we have to, all of us, all of you listening to me today, have to get on board with is the idea that, okay, we will always need some specialists who have, a large amount of knowledge in this field and can actually run the analytics and get the best out of it. But all of us need to become generalists. We need a minimum amount of knowledge about how these machines are working so that we can then start making amazing decisions with them. And I think when you speak to business people, when you speak to them about decision making, it's about making the best decisions out there. That's something they understand. That's something that resonates with them. And it's about making, explaining that, there's treasure out there, but you've got to learn to dig first.
Let's get another survey question up. I think we have two we want to get to before, at the very end, we have a couple more, but let's get number 4 up. In your opinion, how significantly will AI and immersive technologies like the alphabet soup that alter our perception of reality? Boy, that one turned out to be a lot more relevant than I thought it was going to be. And we've given you 2 high-level choices: extremely significantly or significantly. Moderately is a third choice, slightly. And so what we're seeing, how significantly will AI alter our perception of reality? And the reality is that 73%, now the final answer, 76% of our attendees today think it's extremely significant or significant. And there's no contrarians in this group. Nobody thinks that there will be no effect whatsoever. Congratulations. You usually have 4% that'll take that position, but 0%. So I think we're onto something here. Julia, I want to kind of put a little different look at what we've been talking about. All 3 of our panelists today go in and speak to organizations or speak to groups, oftentimes large groups, as Waldo's keynoting, for example, or speak on webinars such as this. What are kind of frustrating things that you might run into, or common questions that you get, which may surprise you, that may have, in your mind, seem to show a lack of understanding? Now, with that question in mind, to our attendees, anyone that wants to send a response would be, what frustrations do you have when people such as Claire and Julia and Waldo show up and tell you what they think? I'd like, the point is, I'd like to see if, we're really talking with each other, or you feel there's a little bit of talking past one another. Okay, I'll stop talking. Julia, what do you make of that?
So a lot of questions that I see, and true about this panel, and well, obviously in here in this conversation, we are focusing on human impact of AI. There is a lot of futurist conversation going on. There is a lot, is it gonna damage us, or is it gonna make our lives completely better? Or so there is a lot of that very much kind of philosophical, high level conversation going on. I'm a very practical person. So if I go talk to the businesses, what are the good things you can do with the power that it gives you? And I'm also, I keep trying to believe that we as humans at some point would want to care that we do good things with the power that we have.
Some of us, I guess.
Yeah, we all hope, right? For that. So a lot of the conversations, and I'm also come from data background. So when I go to the companies and they say, so let's do AI strategy. I'm like, okay, yeah, there are some things you do with AI. It doesn't matter what kind of state your data is in, but majority of differentiation for the business depends a great deal on whether the data in your organization is usable and how did you do on your data strategy or digital transformation strategy. So that's a big question. So there is a lot of excitement. Well, on one hand, there is a lot of fear
Do you try,
if you
do
have
you try
a
to get
futurist
groups?
conversation.
Do you try to get them to think 3 and 5 years ahead? What kind of time frames do you try to work with?
So people want to have results tomorrow, and then that's why I get to be killjoy. And I say, well, some things actually I can get you results tomorrow, but keep in mind those are the things that are going to become table stakes for everybody in your industry. If you want to differentiate, it's not going to be tomorrow unless you did really well on digital transformation. And if you didn't, then it's 1, 2, 3, 5 years. And that's the conversation that I'm trying to have. Again, of course, humanity conversation is a lot more fun to have. It's just not very, practical day to day. Though we do need to have those conversations because regulations and all of that kind of comes into that.
Well, Waldo, what sort of issues and/or frustrations do you encounter when you're speaking with people and trying to plan and help them improve?
If we look at our iPhone, right, this was, 20, 30 years ago, it was almost like a fantasy. It was almost like Star Trekian, for lack of a better word. Like, oh my gosh, you can actually do a FaceTime call and talk to people on a phone and see their faces. And suddenly it's so common right now. From the introduction of the wheel, the age of steel, the industrial revolution, the introduction of the steam engine, right? It created new economies, opportunities, wealth, and it also destroyed and made irrelevant other economies and certain things. So the key is it's like, and it goes back to what I was saying before about retooling yourself. The biggest factor I think we need to look at is how our children, the folks in college right now, and I've got a 13-year-old at home, how are they going to be impacted by artificial intelligence? And are we generating the proper protocols and education so that we leverage it, create new economies or new industries within this artificial intelligence revolution, which I believe is kind of right up there with the industrial revolution, if you really think about it.
Yeah.
How are we going to forecast? And if we can be ahead of the time and be like Steve Jobs and create something like this and leverage it, hey, first to market, you're going to win. But you've got to be willing to be irrelevant in order to create a new landscape of opportunity and wealth. And if you look at what other countries are doing, look at China, right? Let's be honest. There's a lot of smart individuals out there trying to capitalize on this and in other areas. So
change is something that a lot of times people want for everybody else. Sort of like taxes. Everyone else should do it, but me, I'm not so sure. Claire, how does that square up what Waldo said, what Julia said, with kind of your experience and working with organizations and trying to get messages across and the input you receive?
I think the philosophy questions also frustrate me because it just misses the point so much, you know, and especially when I'm often asked to talk about regulating, and I think there's a level where you have to be realistic. We would love democratic governments to be in control of these technologies, but realistically, we are working with multiple third-party dependencies that are incredibly challenging just to trace, let alone, you know, hold accountable. We are working internationally by default. There's no way we can go individually on this. And I think some of those, you know, this idea that we're going to just, you know, we're going to make a decision and regulate and everything's going to be under control is not understanding the complexity of the technologies that we're, these international, phenomenally layered technologies, that data and everything that we're working with. And I think, you know, and I think as well that I think there has been a delay in adoption, and I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it gives us time to adjust, time to accept that, like, I think these changes that Waldo is saying, I don't remember having a smartphone. I just, you know, incrementally got used to get one upgrade and another and another. And I think as long as people don't jump off the bandwagon, like perhaps some elderly people decided not to engage with smartphones at all until they realized it was too late and they were in a terrible mess. I think as long as we continue to engage little by little by little by little, we'll stay up there with the technology, and we don't need to fear it. And we should be celebrating things like the improvements coming in drug generation, for example, health diagnosis.
Yes.
Just fill my heart with joy. You know, we're moving ahead in leaps and bounds in that area.
Well,
we have two variables, just real quick. We have two variables. Remember, as the consumer and as the creator, right? And so there's two major impacts, the retail side, so to speak, and then the production side. And we need to be thinking about both as businessmen and women.
Everything, the Waldo that you're saying, it really sounds like, you know, don't sit around and be passive. I mean, do your part. Maybe you're not the technical expert in any particular thing, but you know how it affects your life, right? And don't just sit there and let it happen. If you want, I mean, is that kind of the gist of what you're saying?
Yeah, you got to be proactive.
Yeah.
And you know, Julia and you know, the doc, very astute at all this, you know, leveraging the data. But I look at it on more on the business side, like how can we really leverage it as a competitive advantage as long as it's done in the right way, as Julia inferred.
When Julia was saying before, I think one of the things was there's a favorite saying of mine, which is we legislate yesterday's problems. I'm always terrified when I hear politicians talking about technology. And I have been since the days of the Atari Democrats, if anyone out there remembers that generation. We legislate yesterday's problems. And so, but Julia, what would you say as far as regulation? I mean, how do we go about it? Is it just this very, very complex things with a lot of subtlety, which is what I think Claire said, or, you know, what do you recommend, I guess, in regulating?
You don't ask me simple questions, do I?
Oh, I'm sorry. You're smart. When I get smart people here, I figure I can't ask them simple questions, you know.
So, you know, I have coming from financial industry, especially with data and management becoming thing after the financial crisis, I have a lot of experience with financial regulations. And there is a lot of complexity to financial markets. And we can have another very in-depth conversation on whether or not financial regulations that existed went up, went down, went sideways, how much do they help and how much do they harm. So overall, if you ask me, do we need regulations around the use of AI? I think the answer is yes. Do we need to have, can we possibly have a regulatory format that regulates every single use expression? No, I don't think that's possible. I'm a big fan of principle-based regulations. So this is the principles we as society want to pursue. And we're going to try to regulate towards the principles as opposed to going into technicalities on how this is how you do things. because that's just never going to work, obviously, right? Because we come up with new ways of doing things like every 5 minutes. So I think
Right.
that in addition
You
to
can't possibly
principle-based
keep up. Yeah.
regulations, yeah, there should be other things, industry-based. I think we will have to figure it out. I don't think we have an answer right now. So regulation is not the only answer. It's a little bit of it, but it's a much bigger picture.
So a couple of things. I mean, so the EU is proposed regulation, but whatever the effects are going to be, they're not going to take place till 2025. And I think there's a lot of privacy in there, but it really looks undefined to me. Now, Claire may be aware that her country kind of not part of the EU anymore, but the issue is still there. What do you make of what the EU is doing, if you've looked at it at all, and what the UK should do, what the US should do, and globally we should do?
So yes, the EU and the UK went in different directions on this one. I think one of the things about the UK and the EU is that we've always had GDPR, and so we have had protections against AI use for over 5 years now, and particularly the right to opt out, the right to have a human explain what the machine has decided, because sometimes we're using what we call black box technologies, where we have absolutely no idea what the machine is looking at when it makes a decision. And that, and what we've discovered is actually they're looking at racist, sexist,
right,
all sorts of irrelevant or undesirable content. So I think that's a great protection. And I know the US Bill of Rights has got this opt-out as a fundamental part of it. And I think that is the biggest and best and strongest protection.
yes,
The right to have a human explain it really does counteract some of the worst abuses.
Yeah.
I think the EU is, it's trying to control member states. In other words, it's trying to control other governments within the EU and limit, for example, police abuse of AI usage, or even, government abuse, just in case you happen to get the wrong person in charge for a period of time.
We won't name any countries, but there are some sort of outliers within the EU right now, I would say.
Yeah, so I think it's this kind of top level, high risk national state risks that they're mostly legislating against, and then after that, it's come on, let's get an agreed definition of what best practice looks like.
Okay. Now, we don't turn into pumpkins at the top of the hour, but we're supposed to finish right around that time. We have one more big survey question. We can put it up, number 5. And what aspect of AI's impact concerns you the most? What aspect concerns you the most? After all this discussion, job displacement, ethical dilemmas, privacy issues, dependence on technology. Those are your options. Ethical dilemmas. Hey, everyone, we're simpatico here. We're in sync. There is, as we thought going into this, and as we've discussed, a very serious issues that have to do with ethics, and ethics is a big word in this case. I think it entails everything from privacy to control to very bad actors. And so that's what we're seeing. And we could ask the last 2 questions. Number 6, please. These are the 2 where there's only one right answer. This is where we ask them if they enjoyed the webinar. Number 6, no, we've got one more here. How prepared do you feel society is to handle the integration of AI? Very moderately, somewhat, not very prepared, not prepared at all. And it's a horse race. This is split pretty much, okay, how prepared do you feel society is to handle the integration of AI into daily life? 38% said somewhat prepared, and 53%, more than half, said we're not very prepared, and we're not prepared at all. One of those 2 options. So a big concern about ethics, big concern about preparation, a big concern, I think, about we all need to do something. And I think then we have one more question. Which of the following topics are of interest to you? Oh, we usually ask if they enjoyed the webinar, but they all 100% always say yes. So we'll assume that's true today. And we've got a question for next year. I just have to thank everybody again for attending today. And we do these on the third Wednesday of every month, December being an exception because of the holidays. But generally, the third Wednesday of every month, we do these webinars. We have a variety of topics for next year. We're going to talk about continued data growth in January. We're going to talk about digital economy in February, and we're going to talk about cybersecurity in March. And if you go to the IDCA website, you won't be able to register for those just yet, but you can contact us directly. We'll get back to you, or just check it after the beginning of the year. We're going to roll all those out. And this audience is here today really would like us to talk about cybersecurity in the future. That's a big issue. And again, cybersecurity is kind of a large word when it comes to this topic. It entails everything from annoying things to actually criminal and governmental dangers. Now, it's the top of the hour, but I said we're not losing the feed or anything. Everybody can hang in for a little bit longer. And I apologize again to the questions we didn't get to. I'm going to start with Waldo and then go to Julia, and then we'll let Claire have the last word. What did you make of today? What's a big takeaway? What's the big takeaway that you'd like everyone to go away with today? Waldo.
I guess seek and you shall find. You know, this is a very prominent factor in society, in business, and in life. The more you gather intelligence, the more you ask and talk to experts and participate and ponder, I think the more confident you'll be both in your business and your life. So just keep showing up and keep asking the tough questions. But as they said in a couple hundred years ago, assimilate or starve. It's coming. Got to find a way to leverage it. Otherwise,
up, don't fall asleep. Julia, I have a simple question for you. What is your takeaway for people?
So I'm gonna actually go to philosophical more. So keep it and build a little on Valda that we are active players here, all of us. While our individual influence may be little, but AI is being educated, brought up, nurtured based on our actions. So if you avoided that it's gonna become a evil, malevolent thing, that's going to be based on our actions. So think about the actions that and decisions we make in the world. What do we put out there, and try to influence it towards the side you want it to go. Hopefully the good side.
Hopefully.
You know,
And Claire?
I agree with Julia and Waldo, to be honest. You know, being data literate, being good at AI is a continuum. You're already a little bit along. Just keep taking the next step and the next step and the next step. Sign up for a course, a beginner's course, whatever it is you need to do next. You'll get there.
You'll get there. And so I want to thank you for joining us. It's an odd time of the year, but you're able to make some time to join us today. And to all of our attendees, again, extraordinary that so many of you could make it, and extraordinary to me that the human dimension this is a very technologically focused audience, and yet the human dimension is of absolute essentiality. It is what's important. You've confirmed that for us today, and we'll all go forward knowing that. So again, thanks everyone for joining. And again, we will see all of our attendees, I hope, next year, and continue conversations with Claire and with Julia and with Waldo. And with that, we'll see you. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.